Okay, so you got me by a couple of years, or by a
Yeah.
year. I'm 48 this year.
All right.
But we came up around the same time during the Satanic Panic. And I guess we should say who your parents are and just kind of get that out of the way so we can get into the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, my mom and dad are Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker. Probably had the biggest television ministry in the 80s. It was kind of like them and I guess Jimmy Swaggart and Pat Robertson and maybe TBN. I don't know what the other, a lot of people, Jerry Falwell, all that stuff was going on at that time. So, yeah. So I kind of grew up on Christian television. I mean, I was literally born. My dad was on set when I was born because they thought my mom was going to be in a long labor, but they had to do emergency C-section. So the audience knew I was born before
Wow.
my dad did.
So you were born unto an audience.
Yeah. It was really weird. I mean, I don't remember it because I was born that day, but till I was about 11 years old, that was my life. And so, and then my parents had a scandal and everything kind of fell apart. And my dad went to prison for 5 years and all this stuff happened. But yeah, so I've kind of lived many lives and in many different places. And honestly, looking back, I'm grateful for those experiences.
So you and I, so like I said, we're about the same age. So there's this wacky thing that happens in the 80s that we're going to look back and call the Satanic Panic, where every kid is getting molested.
Yeah.
The devil is in everything. Now, you are a listener of the heavy music. How was that treated in your house?
Well, that's the really strange thing is that, my sister also was really into music and she's older than me. And, she listened to like Culture Club and,
Oh, wow.
Chicago and Prince. And so she kind of got me into music. And my parents were not ever really against music. I mean, I remember when Stryper came to town and played this small little bar. I must have been 10 years old. They were playing with a satanic band, I think. It was supposed to be a satanic band or whatever. And my parents found out about it and knew I wanted to go. So my mom and dad took me and they had to put us up in the upper part of the bar that was like actually like closed down for storage because they're like, those kids will tear you guys apart. So we're going to put you up here to see Stryper. And my parents like put Stryper up in a really nice hotel and everything. And, so I don't know. I mean, for me, it was really different because like, I mean, I remember going to the, I had to have a security guard because we had death threats all the time and
How
kidnapping.
little were you?
I mean, up until 11. So,
Wow.
But I remember going to like the great thing about having a security guard though was because they had cars, and so I was able to go to the record store. I mean, I remember buying. I loved music. I mean, I think Tougher Than Leather. I remember buying the Run DMC
Run
album,
DMC album, yeah.
and it came with a poster that I had hanging in my room. I mean, the last record I bought that was like me and my dad bought together, and it was like not as like a this was before records weren't a thing. This was like the end of records. The first time was the Fat Boys Wipeout. So my dad was like, "Oh, it's the Fat Boys with with the Beach Boys."
Can't be that bad. This hippity hop can't be that
yeah. Look, they're singing with some old white dudes, and but the thing is that Heritage USA PTL was very like integrated. You know what I mean? It was like racism really didn't become a huge, and here I live in the South, and racism didn't really become a huge reality to me because I was kind of in a bubble until after that. I mean, my parents had like, members, all sorts of people on, had some of the guys from the Black Panther Party were actually on my parents' show, but I until after, because it was such a, so BB and CeCe Winan and all those folks got their start there. These folks were like family to me. And so it was a really strange world. There's a lot of bad. Everybody hears about the bad stuff. But at the same time, growing up that way gave me such a different, unique look of things, of seeing everybody as human, and everybody was just everybody. And so it was like when we lost everything, I got into that real world, and it was like, oh, kids are sitting in different parts of the lunchrooms, everybody's,
You went to private
I went
school?
to high school in Orlando, Florida, and I was like, oh my God, there's Nazi skinheads.
Oh,
There's,
wow.
everybody's, the skaters over there, the hippies
Mm.
over there. So it was different. But yeah, so during that satanic panic thing, here's another weird thing. It's like I remember I think it was my 9th birthday party. My dad got me this big Dungeons and Dragons toy set.
That's the game that they were like, they
They were
killed.
everybody
Yeah.
thought the game was
Yeah.
satanic, but there was also a cartoon that came out,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a toy line, and it was like this play set, and it looked like a big dragon head, and it had like a thing it crushed people in, and the figures. And my parents bought me He-Man, Dungeons and Dragons. Like it just wasn't really like for them. It wasn't really something they were too worried about.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they would have people on their show, and then of course they like the pastors, like so Heritage USA had like tons and tons of different services, and so you had youth group and all these different pastors coming in, so you never really knew what you were going to hear. And so I heard that stuff like in youth group from like youth pastors, like backward masking and all this stuff. I remember one night my sister threw a bunch of Smurfs in my room, and it was because she had gotten back from her service and was told that the Smurfs were demons. So I was like, well, that's nice. My sister threw all the little demons into my room. And I burned, you know what I did? I remember burning that Dungeons and Dragons set after I saw something at youth group, because I thought, oh my gosh, there's going to be demons in my room, and I don't want to, and I slept by myself, so I didn't want to have demons in my room.
Oh, there you go. Just
But it
burn
was
your
really,
money.
yeah, it wasn't like it was so funny that my friends' parents were more like worried about that stuff than my parents actually were, and a lot of those folks like, even worked for my family. So you had these, it was a really strange time. I remember my dad trying the backward masking with my sister's record player, and that frightened me.
It just sounds scary, though.
No, it
when you
sounds scary. There wasn't
it.
any messages. It was just like,
Like, well, you sold me. Like, whatever sounds
yeah.
coming out of there, you sold me. This is
But I
the
mean,
devil.
the funny thing is, I remember my sister had that one Prince album. I think it might have been 1999. It might have been before that, but where like Prince is like laying naked on a pool table when you open it up.
I think that's is that Controversy?
Is it? Yeah. So to
I
give you
think
an
so.
idea
Yeah,
how
yeah,
like
yeah.
my parents weren't like going through our music or anything, But that was also a very 80s thing, is that parents weren't really there.
No. Which
You
I
know?
think that plays into the panic, the hysteria, the fact that
Yeah.
kids were able to say, yeah, they flushed a midget down the toilet, mom, and then they dynamited a giraffe. It was a lot of stuff happened at school today.
Yeah. Or you get on
And
your
then someone
bikes and
touched my
go
butt.
outside until the lights came on. You would go to like some construction area and you'd blow something up and magnify glass and burn ants or do something really crazy. Your parents just didn't know what you were doing. So it was a different time.
Um, did that time, were you able to watch horror movies, or were you scared to do that too? Because of if there's, your environment is interesting to me, because I lived with my grandparents for a short time, and then my grandfather died when I was about 9, and so around that time I didn't have to go to church anymore,
Yeah.
as my grandmother was kind of processing that loss for her, and so I didn't get beat over the head with He-Man is the devil. I remember there was one evangelist that came to church and said He-Man was the devil, and that really pissed me off, because I was like, "Look, lady, I don't know what you're talking about, but this is my favorite play set, and I ain't giving up shit
Right.
because you have some fucked off agenda."
He-Man is my man. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I remember going on like vacations and stuff with the family, and then my sister and her friends watching. What were they watching? Friday the 13th. And
Mm,
so, in those first like 4 films, I think there was kind of a storyline. Also, kind of like in the first like Nightmares on Elm Street. So I was always curious about the storyline as a kid. Like who's the next Jason? What happened? Is that really him? You know what I mean? But I was terrified.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'd sneak into my sister's like parties and stuff, or her, and then her friends watching it, and I would just okay, oh, looks like that kid. Oh, the kid's Jason now. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. But then of course I'd be terrified later.
Mm,
Um, I remember seeing this movie called The Devil's Triangle. It was about the the
A
Bermuda
threesome.
Triangle, and for some reason in those years, the Bermuda Triangle seemed like it was a big deal, like
Yeah.
something we needed to worry about. People were disappearing there. And I thought the devil had gotten inside me when I watched and it was just because I laughed or something, and my laugh went, "Arr!" And I was like, oh my God, the devil's inside me,
Did
And
you
I was
ask
with all my
Pops
friends and stuff, and my friends were like, in the name of Jesus, so, that was,
performed a makeshift exorcism?
yeah, I think it worked. And then we went up and got some Pringles or something, but yeah, it was a strange time. But I'm kind of great. It's where I would watch MTV all the time. And I remember one time we were in New York. My parents were doing something in New York, and I was watching MTV. This is such a really vivid memory for some reason. And there was like a heavy metal band on MTV, and my dad's like, "That's Chuck Satanic." And I was just kind of thinking in my head, like, it's too late, Dad. Like, I've been watching MTV since day one. I'm like 9 years old, 10 years old, and I'm just thinking, like, you're on this is too late, like you can't start talking bad about it now. I've gone down the MTV rabbit hole. So, and the only other time he said something like that was when Sinead O'Connor was
Oh,
on an
oh,
award show, and she put the Public Enemy
oh,
logo
the
on the side of,
Grammys. Yes.
yeah, to protest that they weren't up for an award there. I think it might have not been a
They weren't
Oscar.
on. They weren't going to telecast.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
she put the logo on there, and my dad was like, I was like, "What is that on her head?" And I remember him going, "That's Satanic." And I'll be honest with you, ever since that day, Sinead O'Connor became one of my very favorite artists to this day. So
So it did work that way for
it
you.
did work,
Yeah.
Yeah. So also Public Enemy, I've loved for that since then, probably too. So it was like, those kind of things where you go, "Oh, I'm not supposed to listen to this," and then you gotta listen to it. So for me, it was a weird time. But
So it's because it sounds like your parents were pretty. I don't want to say you just say normal because your life is anything
no,
but normal. But as far as how you're being raised away from the camera is pretty standard. I mean, my mom, who herself was a demon, just ripping and running. I remember she came in my room. I had these Motley Crue pictures on the wall, and she took them all down. She's like, "These are satanic." I was like, "Man, you show me horror movies. Like, you can't."
yeah. No,
Damn
I
it, drug
remember I did
addiction.
have some friends whose older brothers were into Motley Crue,
Mhm.
and I remember like getting a little bit nervous. Or my neighbor friend had that Van Halen album with the Angel Baby, with the cherub smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, 1984. Yeah, I
Yeah, and I
remember
remember
that.
seeing that, going like, I don't know about that. That might be a little too much. Because I was really into the Monkees and like the hip hop. I mean, like,
Mhm.
back then we just called it rap. I mean, that was like, that's what was the big thing. I mean, I literally wore like Adidas without shoestrings in them. I mean, I was either doing that or dressing like Miami Vice.